read the book without being drawn out of the narrative by being aware of its author. Like, that's something I really worried about when I was writing Paper Towns, but ultimately I had to hope that someday someone who didn't know about my videos would read it. Which seems to have happened because, by the way, thanks to you, Paper Towns is going to be on the New York Times bestseller list for a second week in a row. Yes?
What were the 3 sentences that you happen to recollect the time that you took your video camera from Brotherhood 2.0 to the writers group in April something?
You mean when I was writing with Scott Westerfeld and Maureen Johnson and everybody?
Yeah.
What were the 3 sentences? I don't remember. I don't even remember. Can you give me more context than that? Were there...
You had the video camera for about 3 seconds, and then you told Hank to use the non-stop story if you just watch me write 3 sentences into my next novel.
Oh, I'm sure I deleted them. I mean, I delete about 95% of what I write, so that's not an exaggeration. So I think I probably deleted it. But I don't remember where I was in the book. If it was in April, I don't know. I was kind of jumping around then, so. Yeah?
I'm sure that when you're deleting things, like editing your book to kind of make it work better, you're probably deleting a lot of things that you're like, oh, I really, really like this part.
Yes.
And how do you decide, how do you decide that just because you love it, you can't have it in there?
Well, just because something is good writing doesn't mean that it's good writing for your particular book. One thing that I would recommend is going and finding, there's this like big annotated edition of All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren that at the back of it has the original first page of All the King's Men, which is the single best one page of writing I've ever read in my life. And Robert Penn Warren deleted all of it because as good as it wasn't the right opening for the book. And every time I think about like deleting something I like, I think about the fact that Robert Penn Warren deleted like 4 paragraphs that are better than anything that I will ever even approach writing. And if he can do that, then like I can delete my stupid meditations on the histories of post office boxes, which really wasn't Paper Towns. Yes?
What are some of those parts other than the
post office boxes? Post office boxes played a huge role. There was so much. There were like different characters, there were stupid characters, and but yeah, mostly it was like the post office boxes, and there were all these postcards, and there was like this complicated like mail-based. Oh, and there were a lot of world's largest. At the center of the plot really were the 5 world's largest balls of twine. Like there are 5 competing world's largest balls of twine scattered throughout the country, and this was literally like the fact that Paper Towns hinged on in the first draft. So, yeah. Also, I thought about offing her. Yeah.
Is Bluefin a real energy drink?
Bluefin is not a real energy drink, and Go Fast is not a real energy bar. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there are other ones that are probably pretty good. Yes, Travis.
Hey, how'd you get your first book published?
How did I get my first book published? Well, the hardest part was writing it, which took like 3.5 years between writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. Then once I was working at the time at a magazine, and I knew someone else who worked at that magazine who had published books before, and she kind of helped me rewrite it. And then once we'd rewritten it, she was like, I think you should send this to people in New York. So I literally just did. Send like in an envelope. I actually FedExed it overnight, because, I expected them to read it within 6 to 8 hours. And I spent like $300 FedExing it, And then 6.5 months later, someone called me and they said, I would like to publish your book. And I was done, and then I've been there ever since. So, now that said, like when the book sold, between the manuscript that sold and the manuscript that was published, like 80% of the words changed. So, for me, it's a very heavy revision process. I'm a big believer in rewriting. Like I think that on some level, all writing is rewriting. Other questions? Yes?
What's your favorite book?
What's my favorite book?
Of your books.
Of my books?
Yes.
Oh, that's much harder. Well, I would say that you should never trust a writer's opinion on that kind of thing. Mark Twain's favorite book was Joan of Arc, which is arguably the worst thing he ever wrote. Not Huck Finn, or even, I don't know, all of them were better than Joan of Arc. He wrote a book about Christian Science about Mary Baker Eddy that was much better than Joan of Arc. It was terrible, but it was much better. So I wouldn't trust a writer's opinion at all about his own work or her own work. In fact, whenever someone presses something into my hand and says, this is the best thing I have ever written, I'm always like, oh crap. But I think Paper Towns is probably my favorite. I think it's the most finished and accomplished, I hope. I don't think it's that great or anything. Yes, all the way in the back.
Is a last death an accident or suicide?
Well, that's a spoiler. Don't worry, because good books are essentially unspoilable. I don't know. And I knew that I would never know when I started writing the book. That was the only thing I knew about it. Yes?
What amusement park would you consider breaking into?
Well, SeaWorld is extremely easy to break into.
Other than that.
But Disney is harder. but ultimately more fulfilling. Next question. Yes, purple shirt.
Who's an acid tank?
Hank is a massive incandescent gas. That doesn't make any sense to me. First off, really, who is Hank? No joke. That's the first thing you're thinking. And the second thing you're thinking is, Hank is the sun? Yes.
So what is your favorite book like out of all books?
My favorite book out of all books ever published, maybe Gatsby. I mean, like, it's clear that I have a profound like in this book for Gatsby, and it's also clear that I really like Moby Dick, even though Q never reads Moby Dick. Like, he can find it, but he doesn't read it. And I think it's also clear that I'm a big fan of songs myself. Really, really clear. Yeah.
When you were in high school, were you like one of those kids when you read the novels, like, who would, when the teacher asked a question, they'd raise their hand and they know the answers? Like,
I would raise my hand, but I was usually, like, wrong. I was definitely a hand raiser. I mean, I tried way too hard. For one thing, I would often raise my hand about things that I flagrantly had not read. And, like, I would just get absolutely owned. I remember we were reading Faust and Dr. Faustus at the same time by Goethe and Marlowe, and I was commenting on how it seemed like Marlowe was responding to Goethe, and my English teacher was like, not probable. Marlowe lived many years before Goethe. Is there another question for you? Yes.
For the Favorite Towns movie, how is Marlowe supposed to be cast, since we already have a really clear image of her from all the covers?
Oh, man. I particularly don't know how to answer that question given the particular makeup of this particular audience, since people involved are here. I don't know. That's not my job, thank God. But I will say, like, book covers change. So I bet the book cover would change, would be my guess. But I like Dana from MySpace. This is Dana from Canada. So can I tell you guys a story about Dana real quick, actually? So, like, they came up with this cover, like, the designer and I came up with this cover design, and we liked it, but then they started to send us models, and they were sending us, like, super anorexic, like, tragically sad models who, you know, like, participate in the destruction of the social order and everything. And I was like, I really would rather not participate in the destruction of the social order if it's not absolutely necessary. And they were like, well, these are what models look like. And I was like, well, find me models who don't look like models then, whatever. And then they sent me like 100 models, all of whom were ridiculous. Like, some of them were 45 years old. In fact, one of them was in a spread in Vogue magazine in which she was playing not a bride, but the mother of the bride. And I was like, I want a teenage girl who looks like a teenage girl, and they got mad at me, and they were like, fine, look at it, find it yourself. Oh, by the way, don't put any of this on YouTube. Thank you. Okay. That's going to be on YouTube. I'm going to be in double trouble. So like, I looked at, like my editor and I and the designer were all together, like, looking at all of these modeling sites, but, like, they always looked like models. So then what we started to do was just to look at their MySpaces. Like, because they had their names, and then we would just look at their MySpaces, because then they looked real. And Dana had an awesome MySpace. She just looked really cool. So we hired her, they hired her. She flies down, my editor is there, and Dana walks up to my editor and says, I loved Paper Towns. And Julie's like, great, well, I'm so glad that you had a chance to read it. And Dana was like, no, I loved it. He was like, awesome, that's great. And then Dana said, I mean, sometimes I feel just like Margot Roth Spiegelman. And Julie's like, yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad you thought it was a believable character. And Dana said, I mean, I could just disappear And Julie was like, okay, do me a big favor, stay for the photo shoot, and go on your way. So, that's Dana. She's so awesome, we're MySpace friends. I like check out her updates and everything, her status updates. Is there a question over here? Did you have a question? You had your hand up earlier? Yes.
What about the abysmal new cover for Looking for Alaska?
The question is, what about the abysmal new cover of Looking for Alaska? The other cover is still the cover. That is a special premium, you can't make these things up, premium edition. That costs $2 more and has much cheaper paper. So yeah, you don't have to buy that one if you don't want to. The other one is still in print. But I'm sorry about that if you don't like it. I'm not going to comment on it.